Hello, everyone. We are here to discuss the importance of fathers and the role that they play in the sacred birth space and what their role is when it comes to labor and birth and how they can really show up and advocate for their partner and baby. And today I have my husband here who has been an amazing birth partner throughout the two birth experiences of both of our children. And he did a phenomenal job setting up the birth space when we gave birth to our second. And honestly, these experiences were so magical and an experience I want to remember. And he has a very important role to play in how these experiences unfolded. So I thought he would be the perfect person to have this discussion with on the crucial role that fathers play in the birth space. And so, first of all, we want to acknowledge that birth is a sacred event. It is a natural event. It is a normal occurrence that needs to be supported in order for it to unfold the way that it needs to be. And more couples are realizing the importance of this process, but they are not sure how to support this process. And actually, we were having a conversation with a couple the other day who really want to embrace this normal physiological process. And it just goes to show that so many people want this for themselves, but they don't know where to start. And so I thought this was a very important discussion to share for those of you who are on this path.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So let's start off. What is the role that a father plays, the crucial role that a father plays in the sacred birth space? What is your role? How do you show up in order to protect the normal and natural unfolding of a normal physiological birth?
Okay, well, I think you just hinted at it. I feel like the role of the father, I felt this way personally, that it's my job to protect that space, to help set it up, because as you know, most births occur in hospitals, and so, that's outside of the sort of purview of the husband. Like, that space is already set in the way that it suits the needs of the allopathic doctors and the OBs and stuff like that, right? So if you're doing something alternative, then the onus is on you as a family as to how you want that space set up in order to facilitate that sacred experience. And I think that's something that you really want to approach natural birth or birth in general with, is the idea that it's a sacred experience. It's not some sort of medical emergency or some sort of physiological error or something that needs to be corrected. It's actually a sacred experience, and so you want to treat it as such. And so as the husband, as the partner of the one that's giving birth and father, I took it upon myself to think about, well, how do we set that stage or set up that space in a way that is conducive to ease and just treating it in the sacred way that it should be, right? So I sort of envision the role of the father as the one that's setting up the space, and also, like you hinted at, protecting the space, right? If you really think about it, in this situation, in this scenario, the woman that's giving birth is in a very vulnerable state. She's not in a state in which she can sort of do anything to protect herself. She is completely vulnerable. Baby is completely vulnerable. So in other words, the husband is the person that is going to have to step in and make sure that that there's safety, a safe container within which this experience can actually unfold. And so presenting the container, the space itself, setting it up, protecting it, serve within that space the needs of the mother and baby, I think is very needful and important. And so that's how I sort of approached it.
Yeah, and I think you did a wonderful job when you did set up the birth space. You did mention that you are the protector of the space and you tap into your primal instincts, and you talked about being of service to the mother and baby. Can you talk a little bit about how you can be a protector and be of service on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Those are three levels, that we're operating on here, because it's not just a physical experience like I just hinted at or we just talked about. It's a spiritual experience. There's an eternal being that is choosing to incarnate into this world, through the portal of the mother and the mother's womb. And so, yeah, it's a spiritual experience. So how do you prepare the space in that sense? Well, I feel like in order to be a protector, or like a space holder in terms of the spiritual dimension, you want to prepare yourself. I feel like if you are frazzled, if you are disconnected from spirit and source yourself as the husband, then you're not going to be able to really have that connection yourself, and therefore you're not going to be able to pass that on to others in your immediate surroundings, your wife, your child. And so I feel like to prepare that space spiritually, you must prepare yourself spiritually. You have to be following some sort of spiritual practice, connectedness, like actually paying attention to that dimension of yourself, and making sure that you are facilitating that for yourself. Because if it's kind of like the idea of the plane's coming down, and you first of all have to put your mask on, your own oxygen mask, before you can help others, right? So it's like that. If you're spiritually disconnected, how could you facilitate spiritual connection, right? How could you look at this circumstance, this situation that is sacred, and see the sacredness in it, or see the reverence in what's going on, right? And the seriousness of it on a different level. So yeah, preparing yourself, being like through meditation, through your own practice of gratitude, and just understanding the spiritual dimensions that play here is very important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you made, because it is fine-tuning your energy, because you are holding this energetic container for mom and baby to
Yeah, and so I think part of it
to
also
work together.
is embodying trust in the
Yes.
divine as well.
Trust.
I think that's really important, because if you don't feel trustful of divinity, of the fact that what's happening here is so way beyond your control. It's in the hands of spirit, right, and source, and the being that's coming through, and is a divine eternal being as well, like all of these things. Then yeah, if you're not really sort of like trusting that process and trusting that unfoldment, then you're going to be off kilter. You're not going to have that groundedness and that sense of calm, and that sense of like approaching this with the idea that everything is under control.
Yeah.
And it's all beyond your control.
Yeah, because there is a degree of just surrendering to the unknown for both mom and the father, right? That this is a sacred experience that can unfold in whichever way, but it's maintaining that trust and surrender in something much greater than us that really helps the normal physiological birth process to unfold without feeling the need to overly control what's happening. And that's what's happening a lot in the systems. If you give birth within the system, you are going to find your birth experience micromanaged and controlled, and a lot of the times this is leading women into very traumatic experiences and requiring a lot of medical interventions, when really it's not needed, because a lot of doctors have not actually witnessed a normal physiological birth. They've been trained to control and manage birth, and so that's how they will do it when a woman goes into the system, right? And a lot of people are not even aware what a normal physiological birth looks like, or what, and there's a lot of variation and whatnot. So you talked about surrendering to the divine and something much greater than us, and really building that spiritual foundation, which I totally wholeheartedly believe, because it's a spiritual event first and foremost. But what's another way that men can prepare themselves aside from the spiritual foundations?
Okay, so also mentally. I think mental preparation is very key. And so, what does mental preparation look like? Well, informing yourself. I think it comes down to the idea of learning, of knowing that, well, okay, we've been inundated by information that has been propagandistic and sort of like just really tilted towards the ascendancy of the allopathic system and all the practitioners. So it's kind of like it's not we haven't been really given in society a clear picture of what is really going on here and what the full implications of all of this is. So I think that as the protector of the space, as the husband, you want to make sure that you are also prepared mentally by doing your research. Okay, like when you do research, you come to realize that they're going to lead you down or lead your wife into certain types of interventions that they are going to want to, because of the lack of trust in the spiritual dimension. They feel like they have to be the ones with all their hubris to come in and make it happen. But really and truly, the unfolding is going to happen, according to divine plan. You have to let that be, based upon your own spiritual connection and your trust and surrender. But you want to prepare yourself. You need to do your research, understand why you want to have a natural physiological birth. For instance, like by reading before the time, like I came to realize that for a woman to have a vaginal birth is so much more needful than a cesarean, because of the fact that there's the seeding of the baby's gut bacteria that happens as a result of coming through the vaginal canal,
which is crucial for their immune system,
crucial for their immunity and things like that moving forward in life. And just you want to do some reading, you want to do some looking into this stuff. So preparing yourself mentally is definitely key. Preparing yourself mentally for what you might experience, and if you feel squeamish beforehand or whatever the case may be, you have to do whatever you need to do in order to be ready to deal with that. You can't be the one to be squeamish in that situation, because as the protector and as the sort of like the container, like you're sort of being a containment in a sense, where you want to create a space that is safe for mommy and baby. Like the mother feels comfortable, and if she feels like you are squeamish, then she's not going to feel comfortable. You have to prepare yourself mentally to know that what you're going to experience
is raw and beautiful.
Exactly. It's like, okay, you know what, you got to just be prepared. You can't show any signs of, oh my gosh, what is happening here and things like that. You need to be the one that is holding down a calmness, and that calmness that you are going to exude is going to have an effect upon mother's sense of calm, and that is so key and necessary for her to feel vulnerable enough to do what she has to do, to really let herself go and just completely surrender to the process of birth. So you have to prepare yourself mentally for the fact that, hey, things might be going down that you may have been unfamiliar or squeamish about in the past, but this is the time when you have to really kind of man up in a sense, and just really say, hey, okay, you know what, there's no time for that. I have to be the one that's stepping in here and presenting this space, protecting this space, and facilitating this space in a way that facilitates calm, safety.
Yeah, because like energetically, like that's also playing into the energetics of the space. So what we find in the system is that a lot of times birth is met with a fear-based lens, and this energetically rubs off on women, making them feel like they're unsafe, or their bodies are unsafe, their babies are unsafe, and it gets them into this chaotic way of thinking and feeling. And so that's not what we want. The energy is too ruffled in that sense, and she cannot focus on grounding her energy and making her energy descend in order to allow her baby to descend into the birth canal. And that's what I talk about in my birth programs, by weaving in the science of Ayurveda and the way that energy flows for birth as well. So you're absolutely right. When men bring that sense of safety, that sense of calm, ease, and trust into the process, women are able to trust in the process as well, and relax and feel safe to surrender to the unfolding of the birth of their baby.
Yeah, and also physically, right? Like that's the other dimension that preparation has to be made. in regards to. And so that has to do with the physical preparation of setting up the space. So if it's a home birth, like for our last one, we had a home birth in his room, and we got a pool. So for me, my job was to procure the pool, set it up, make sure that everything is running beforehand. You want to have everything packed and ready. You want to create create ambiance as well, like make the space conducive to what the sacredness that is gonna unfold within that space. Like treat it as almost as a ritual, as a spiritual ritual, because it is this is the opening of a portal, in a sense, really, if you think about it, right? So,
and you did a wonderful job. You had the soft lighting from the salt lamps in the room, and it was really nicely done, and I did feel calm and at ease. And it's very different from giving birth in a hospital. A lot of the times women are whisked away in the middle of the night, early mornings, into the hospital where there's these very bright lights. It's a very cold
clinical
atmosphere. That's unfamiliar, and it's very jarring to your energy. It doesn't allow that your hormones to work properly to facilitate birth, right? And usually women go into birth overnight, and that's for a very good reason. The hormones oxytocin and melatonin are heightened at this time, and so it's so necessary for these hormones to be working in harmony together. And so when you go to the cold clinical setting and disrupting the process with these bright lights, it's interrupting the flow of these hormones as well.
Yeah, so that's part of setting the stage for calm and ease, right? Like, so you're setting that up in a physical way, right? Like, not only are you preparing yourself to be that calm sort of like grounding influence, but you're also setting up a calm influence or a calm space in which there is a sense of being able to relax into it, right? Into the process. So setting up the space, making sure everything's packed, making sure everything is tested beforehand and is ready to go. So you want to make sure that if your partner goes into labor, that everything is ready to go at the snap of at the drop of a dime. You know what you're going to do. You've rehearsed it in your mind. You've thought it through, and you want to consult with your wife and make sure that the space and everything is conducive to what she feels like she needs, right?
Yeah. Keeping it woman-centered, right? And so that, because really it's about the woman and really serving her, being a service to her during this time and whatnot, right? And you're not going to get that necessarily in the system, because the system is working for itself. It's honoring itself and its own interests when you give birth there, because there are other considerations that they have to make on their end. And so it's not necessarily your birth choices that they're going to put at the forefront. It's going to be, well, what serves them and protects them. And at the end of the day, your baby's born only once, and you're the one who has to live with the memories of this birth experience. And so preparing yourself and on all three levels, mind, body, and spirit, is so crucial for this journey, whether it be in the hospital or at home. And we are huge advocates for home births. I mean, if I had to do this 10 times over, it would be at home. So
not that we want to do it 10 times more, but if we had to, it would always be at home. The first one was in the hospital, the second one was at home. And
but the hospital one
the hospital was great because we had a dedicated room just for her, and there was a tub in it, and so it was actually it worked out very well.
Yeah, it was a normal physiological birth in the hospital, and that only worked out the way it did because I had a really wonderful team of old school midwives. And I say old school because they stay true to their title as midwives. These days, some midwives are practicing like OBs. And so I was very privileged to have had an older team of midwives who stayed true to what their role was. I also had student midwives attend my birth as well, who acted like doulas during that time. And honestly, like, it was I came out of that birth experience thinking, They did nothing. No one did anything, right?
I guess
And
that's
that's the whole point.
That's
You
the
want to
point.
work
It's like,
out. You want to
it's
walk
not
out
as
your work.
complicated as
Exactly.
the allopaths try to make it look like, oh, we gotta swoop in with all our technology and our
Yeah.
expertise and do this and that and the other. It's
Yeah.
almost like they feel like they have to earn their keep or make it look like they're doing something and justifying all of the stuff that they do. The body is made for it, right? So it's not something that you have to
Yeah, you're perfectly designed
pretend
for
that you're
this
doing
process.
all this stuff
Yeah.
to facilitate it when it's not half that or maybe more than that is not really even needed or necessary. And in fact, it just complicates things in the long run.
It
right?
really does, and I really do appreciate how hands off they were, and it really made me come to realize my own innate power. And I love that everyone there was just there. They were observing the process. They were just observing it as it unfolded. And the student midwives who acted like doulas during this experience, they provided me words of encouragement, and that's all I needed to hear. I just needed their presence. I needed to hear their words of encouragement, and I felt their trust in the process. Energetically, I did not feel like I needed to be scared about anything. Just their presence alone and their knowledge in the normal physiological process of birth was enough. And Jose was wonderful in doing just that, just observing and supporting me. If I requested cold water, ice, or something else, they just kind of attended to that. And that's exactly what it is. It was purely woman-centered, and I was very grateful to have that experience, especially in a hospital where it's not always the case, right? And so it does make a big difference when you're giving birth with an aligned birth team.
Yeah, and I think part of the idea of preparing beforehand is having the discussion around what interventions you want, if any. For us, we wanted none or as little as possible because it's not necessary and it complicates things.
Yeah.
So that was already the agreement of part of the mental preparation, part of the also the role of the husband as the protector of the space. When your wife is vulnerable, she's not going to be able to advocate for herself. You're going to have to be the one that steps in there and speaks to the healthcare professionals, speaks to the whoever it is that's involved in this process, and you have to have a strong sort of like sense of what it is you want and what it is that you both want, so that you can stick to that. You don't allow people that have their own agenda or their own procedures that they just automatically do to swoop in there with something that is going to complicate things. So you have to be prepared as the husband, as the partner, to really stand up for what it is you want and make sure that you do not allow anybody that is going to come in with something that is going to be against that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I was thinking about the idea of in primal times, perhaps the birth space would have been a cave. Who knows? Like maybe it's a cave and it's like you have to protect that space from wild animals, perhaps, wanting to come in. And in this case, we don't have, lions and tigers, but we have, doctors with needles, and we have people that want to do these types of invasive procedures and things like that. Be prepared to perhaps even, if need be, butt heads with people that are going to try to swoop in and just without consent do anything. You have to make sure that you know what you're about, what your wife wants, what you both want, and what you're going to tolerate and not tolerate. And you have to have the guts to stand by that and to be able to really defend that.
Yeah, so standing firm in your values. I think also embracing the normal physiological birth process really kind of puts your relationship to the test. It puts your values to the test. It also puts your spiritual foundations to the test as well. And I would say that being on the same page as your partner, entering the birth room with the same conviction is very powerful. I think we're very much on the same page. Even before entering the labor and birth room, before even conceiving, we were on a journey where we had certain health values, family values that we felt very strongly about. And it's about identifying those values, and your partnership needs to be built on these foundations for a successful journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So there must be a lot of communication beforehand. No surprises. You should be able to come to a place of compromise and make sure that, well, leaning more towards what your wife needs and wants, because you obviously, she's the one that's going to be delivering, right? Like, she's the one feeling the pain, she's the one that is going to be completely vulnerable in that situation, and so it can't be about you. However, like, if you feel a strong inclination towards natural and your wife doesn't, well, I mean, you have to negotiate that.
Yeah.
Right. That's all negotiable, and that's all something that comes down to your relationship and your communication, and how open are you within that relationship to communicate together. And really, I mean, if you really think about it, that child that you're going to raise, it's going to have to be a joint effort, so you may as well start communicating about it beforehand and knowing exactly where you're going with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a strong partnership and having that open line of communication is very key to discuss the birth options. And I like that you kind of reminded people that it's women centered. It's not about anyone else, because it's the woman who's going through this, and really and truly it's her body as well, right? And that also needs to be honored throughout the process.
Yeah, you don't want to be trying to impose your will on birth upon your wife in that sense, because at the end of the day, if she doesn't feel comfortable and she doesn't feel at ease, then it's not going to be a generally optimal and positive experience for her. So there must be communication. I do believe that is necessary.
So the roles of fathers in the sacred birth space is absolutely crucial. The way that they show up is so important for the mother and child. And so you talked about getting energetically aligned, because you are holding a sacred energetic container for birth to unfold, and it's important to connect with spirit, have some sort of spiritual practice that you lean into in order for you to trust the process. Then you also talked about mentally preparing, which is educating yourself, getting yourself informed to get the bigger picture on birth interventions, why you don't want birth interventions, why you might want birth interventions, and why is a normal physiological birth so important? How is that beneficial for both mom and baby? And so the more you know, the more comfortable you are with saying no to things that do not serve your birth desires, and the more you know, you're able to advocate properly for your wife and baby. And lastly, you talked about physically preparing the space and being the protector of the sacred birth space. So that is setting the ambiance, that's being on the lookout for anything that might disrupt the normal physiological birth process, and bringing a sense of ease and safety for both mom and baby to do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So one more thing that I want to mention about setting yourself up physically for the process of birth and facilitating that and helping with that is to prepare your own vessel physically even before conception. I'm a firm believer in epigenetics and the idea that everything that you do, that you think, your behaviors and everything prior to birth, even prior to conception, is going to be passed on to your offspring. And as a conscious partner, you don't want to just say, I'm going to stop drinking and smoking before we start trying to have a baby. But if you are even planning on having a baby, months down the line or whatever the case may be, you want to start preparing yourself physically by making sure that you are taking good care of your own vessel, your own body, right? Like, you want to be exercising, you want to be eating right, you want to be sleeping, you want to be doing all of the things that are going to allow you to pass on those types of energetic imprints to your baby in conception, even before conception. So that starts with preparing yourself even before conception is on the table.
Yeah, and Ayurveda talks about this too. Whatever you digest through your five senses becomes a part of who you are, right? And so it's important to pay attention to what you are consuming visually, and what you're listening to, and what you're eating, and the activities that you're engaging in, because that ultimately becomes a part of you. And so forming those habits and making sure that your vessel is healthy on all levels is very key.
Yeah, because if you as the father are very unhealthy, you're passing that on. there's going to be a part of, there's going to be an imprint that is passed on. And so prepare yourself, start making sure that you are living the type of life that is optimum for you, that you feel most proud of, and that you would feel proud to pass on the imprint of that life towards your offspring.
Yeah, and I think that's very important that you mentioned, because I think all too often the focus is on the woman preparing her physical vessel, and because she's going to be carrying the baby for 9 months. But it goes beyond that. It's a partnership. It takes two to create a soul earth side. So this is a very key piece of information for men out there who are thinking about conception and starting a family. It's about also getting all your ducks in a row as well too. So it's not just the woman who has to prepare her physical vessel, it's also the men. Well, thank you so much, Jose, for being an amazing birth partner and for doing this whole discussion with me and sharing this topic with other couples who are interested in embracing the normal physiological birth process, who are ready to step in and reclaim their power. It is their birthright to give birth to their children uninterrupted in the most sacred and beautiful way possible, because it leaves an energetic blueprint on our babies too, the way that they're welcomed into the world, the way that they are greeted by their parents. So it is such an important topic, and we could talk more and more about it. There are a lot of things to say about the way someone is born, and I hope this answers some questions for couples who feel more confident in their birth choices after listening to our discussion today.
You're absolutely welcome. It was my pleasure. I feel very passionate about this as well, because it's something that is so important for couples to grasp, not only women but couples in general, and men need to start thinking about these things as well, because obviously it takes two to bring a child into the world. And so it's not all on the shoulders of the mother. It's also something that men need to start thinking about and really preparing themselves for, because you have a very important role to play in the whole process. So it's my pleasure.
All right, thank you.